I still remember the sound of the gravel under my shoes that evening. Sharp. Crunching. Final. The sun was going down behind the Brooks family farm, turning the fields gold, turning the dust in the air into little floating sparks. I had one suitcase in my hand, the same cheap blue one I brought with me the day I married Peter. But this time, it felt heavier. Not because of what was inside, but because of everything I was carrying in my chest. Gloria stood on the porch, her arms folded tight across her church blouse. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was furious. "You'll regret this, Marion," she yelled, like a curse she'd been waiting years to speak out loud. "You don't walk away from a Brooks farm. You don't walk away from family." Behind her, Randall stood near the door, one hand on the railing like he was holding up the whole house by himself. His voice was low, steady, the kind that makes your stomach drop. "You think you won something here," he said. "You ain't taking a dime. You hear me? Not a dime." But I wasn't looking at either of them. My eyes were on the woman standing halfway down the driveway, holding a crying baby against her shoulder. Alyssa. Peter's younger wife. The woman I didn't know existed until weeks after he died, until the papers in that locked desk told the story Gloria and Randall had kept hidden. She looked broken. Not angry. Not hateful. Just lost. Like someone had unplugged the world around her and she didn't know how to put it back. "Marion," she called out, her voice shaking. "Please, you deserve to know everything. None of this was your fault. I didn't know about you. I swear, I didn't know." Gloria whipped around and shouted at her, "Get back inside before you make this worse." But the truth was already spilling out. And once truth starts pouring, there's no way to shove it back in the bottle. My heart felt like someone had hooked a claw into it and dragged it down. I wasn't just walking away from a farm. I was walking away from a life that had never been real. A marriage that had been shared without my knowledge. A family that saw me as labor, and then as a threat. I tightened my grip on my suitcase. My hand was trembling, but my feet were firm. Because the moment I learned the truth about Peter's secret family, the moment I discovered how his parents trapped me, lied to me, and used me, that was the moment I realized I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with everything they tried to hide. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories coming soon. I always start the story with the wedding album. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was the last time I still believed I'd married a man who would protect me. A man who'd stand up for me. A man who wasn't keeping a whole other life hidden in his back pocket. The photos sit in a red leather book on the top shelf of my closet. Some days, I can't stand to look at it. But other days, like this one, I open it just to remind myself that the warning signs were already there, I just didn't know how to read them. There's Peter in his gray suit, smiling like he had the whole world figured out. And there I am beside him, holding his arm, laughing at something he whispered. I look happy. Not blind happy, but hopeful happy. The kind of hope you only feel when you think honesty is the foundation of your future. Then there's his mother, Gloria, standing stiff as a fence post beside us. No softness in her eyes. No pride. She looks exactly like someone who expected her son to marry a woman she chose, not me. I remember asking Peter about it later that night. "Your mama didn't smile once," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He kissed my forehead and said, "She just needs time. You'll win her over. She'll love you once she sees your heart." I believed him. I believed every word that man said back then. But there's a picture near the back of the album that still makes my stomach tighten. A young woman, slim, quiet, standing near the edge of the crowd, holding a baby no one introduced to me. Her eyes weren't on the bride. They were on Peter. And now, looking back, I realized that was the first shadow of a truth I wasn't meant to see. The first time Peter drove me out to the Brooks family farm, it was early morning. The sky was still soft and pink, the kind of quiet that makes you believe you're stepping into something peaceful. I remember leaning my head against the window, watching the pine trees slide past, feeling that small, warm flutter in my chest, the one you get when life feels like it's opening up. "We're almost there," Peter said, giving my knee a quick squeeze. He looked proud, almost boyish, like he was bringing me home to show me where he grew up. "Just wait till you see the fields. Daddy worked them his whole life." The dirt road felt longer than I expected. Every few seconds the truck jolted over a deep pothole, rattling the windows. I laughed it off then. I told myself I'd get used to country roads. I told myself love makes everything easier. But when the farmhouse came into view, my breath caught. Not in awe, in surprise. The house was big, yes, but worn. The paint peeling. The porch sagging. Fences broken in places like no one had bothered to fix them in years. The fields looked dry. Abandoned almost. Not the thriving family farm Peter had talked about every night during our courtship. On the porch stood Gloria, her arms crossed, her face hard as stone. Randall stood beside her, his eyes scanning me head to toe like he was evaluating livestock. I smiled, trying to look warm, open, grateful. But neither of them smiled back. "Welcome," Gloria said, flat and cold. "You'll learn how we do things out here." Those were her first words to me. And even then, I felt something shift in my chest, small, but sharp enough that I should have paid attention. The first morning on the farm, I woke up early, thinking I'd make a good impression. I wasn't trying to be perfect, just helpful. I knew I was marrying into an older Southern family, and I wanted them to feel comfortable with me. I tied my hair back, washed my face, and went downstairs expecting a quiet breakfast with Peter. But the kitchen was already busy. Gloria stood at the stove with pots bubbling, pans frying, and the oven door hanging open like it had been kicked too many times. Randall was at the table, reading a newspaper so old it looked more like a prop than something he cared about. Darryl walked in and out, scratching his belly, smelling like last night's beer. I smiled. "Good morning." Gloria didn't turn around. She just pointed the wooden spoon toward the counter. "Biscuits need cutting. Plates go on the table. Eggs need cracking." I blinked, a little startled. "Oh, sure. I can help." "Help," she repeated, almost laughing under her breath. "No, Marion. Around here, we all pitch in. You married into a working family." Peter walked in right then, slipping his arms around my waist. "Morning, baby," he said, kissing my cheek. Then he sat down. Just sat down. While I stood there holding a bowl of eggs like I was interviewing for a job I didn't apply for. I waited for him to say something, anything, to soften the moment. But he just asked his mother for coffee. That was the moment I realized something subtle but important. Peter didn't bring me home as his partner. He brought me home as someone he expected to fit in without complaint. And the longer I stood in that kitchen, the clearer it became, I wasn't being welcomed. I was being put to work. A week after moving on to the farm, I finally saw a job posting in town that felt perfect for me, receptionist at a small medical clinic. Nothing fancy, nothing stressful. Just steady hours, a steady paycheck, and a reason to get off the farm a few days a week. When I told Peter about it, he smiled. "That sounds good, baby. Mama just needs you for a little while, but go ahead and try. It'll be good for you." I held on to those words. The interview was scheduled for Friday morning. I laid out my clothes the night before, ironed my shirt, polished the shoes I hadn't worn since the wedding. I was nervous, yes, but excited too. I felt like I was finally taking a step toward building a life that was mine inside this marriage. Friday morning, I came downstairs ready to leave early. And that's when I saw the empty hook by the door. The truck keys were gone. Peter had already left. Darryl shrugged when I asked about him. He said he had errands. "Didn't know you needed the truck." I checked the kitchen counter. Checked the drawer where Gloria kept the spare keys. Checked the coffee table. Nothing. When I asked Gloria if she'd seen the keys, she didn't even look up from her Bible. "You don't need a job right now. Plenty to do here." My chest tightened. "Gloria, I already scheduled, then call M and cancel. She flipped a page. Family comes first. I walked outside, blinking back the sting in my eyes, knowing full well I couldn't walk 10 miles in the Mississippi heat and still show up looking decent. My phone buzzed an hour later, the clinic leaving a message, politely withdrawing the interview because I seemed unsure. I sat on the back steps holding the phone, hearing Gloria's words echo in my head, "You don't need a job." And that was the moment I felt it, a quiet shift from inconvenience to control. Losing that job interview hurt, but I tried to shake it off. I told myself maybe it just wasn't the right time. Maybe something better would come along. I kept repeating those little promises in my head, the ones you use to keep yourself upright when things feel unsteady. Then, a few days later, another piece of my independence quietly disappeared. It started when I went to buy groceries in town with Peter. We were standing at the checkout line, and I reached for my wallet. Peter laughed and said, "I got it, baby. Keep your money." I smiled, thinking it was sweet, until he placed my card back into my hand. Except it wasn't my card. It was a replacement, the same bank, same color, but the name on it read, Marion Brooks, joint account holder. My stomach dropped. "Peter, where's my original card?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the exit. "Daddy helped me reorganize our bills. It's easier this way. One account, one household." He kissed my temple like it was no big deal. "Family finances, baby. We're building a future." I tried to keep my voice steady. "But why didn't you ask me?" Before he could answer, Randall walked up behind us. "That's how we do it here," he said, his voice flat. "A family don't need 4 or 5 separate accounts. Causes confusion." Confusion? The only confusion was why my personal savings, the little I had left from before the marriage, weren't showing up on the new app Peter installed on my phone. When we got home, I checked again. The balance was almost zero. Just household expenses. Just farm needs. All decided without me. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that new card, realizing something I didn't want to admit: they weren't helping me belong. They were removing every way I could stand on my own. The first time the Brooks family humiliated me in public, it came disguised as a Sunday tradition, a big family lunch after church. I didn't grow up with that kind of gathering, so I thought it would be a chance to bond, to breathe a little outside the walls of the farmhouse. But I should have known better the moment Gloria handed me an apron before church and said, "Make sure the roast is done when we get back." When everyone returned, cousins, aunties, neighbors, the house filled with laughter and voices. But all of it was happening on the other side of the kitchen wall. I was in the heat, checking the cornbread, stirring gravy, making plates. Peter walked in once, kissed my cheek, whispered, "They like you. You're doing great," and disappeared before I could even ask him to help. When the food was finally ready, I carried the dishes to the dining table. Everyone sat down without hesitation, except me. There wasn't a chair left. I set down the last bowl and moved toward an empty spot near the end of the table, but before I could pull the chair out, Gloria spoke loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Marion, honey," she said, forcing a sweet tone that fooled no one, "you can't sit yet. You're responsible for keeping the kitchen stocked. Go make sure the tea pitchers are full." A cousin laughed. Another leaned over and whispered, "New maid's quick on her feet." The whole table chuckled. My cheeks burned hot. I forced a smile because I didn't know what else to do. Peter looked at his plate, pretending he didn't hear a thing. I went back to the kitchen, refilling those pitchers with shaking hands, the weight of their laughter sitting heavy on my back. That was the moment I realized something terrible. In their eyes, I wasn't Peter's wife. I was the help, and not even respected help. And Peter's silence cut deeper than any of their words. There was a small office above the old barn, a square room with dusty windows and a crooked metal door that groaned whenever it opened. Peter once told me it was where his father kept farm business, but the way Randall carried himself around that room made it feel more like a vault than an office. Most days, the door stayed locked. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see the light on through the window. Shadows moving. Whispers drifting down the stairs. Daryl's laugh. Randall's low voice. A drawer slamming shut. It always made my stomach tighten, though I couldn't explain why. One afternoon, when everyone was busy unloading hay bales, I walked past the barn and noticed something strange. The office door was slightly open. Just an inch. Just enough to make my heart thump in my ears. I shouldn't have looked inside. I knew that. But curiosity has a way of rising up when your world doesn't feel honest anymore. I pushed the door open a little more. The first thing I saw was a gray metal desk with stacks of papers, bills, receipts, envelopes. On the wall hung a framed family photo I didn't recognize. Peter stood in it, holding a little girl, the same baby I'd seen in the wedding album crowd. Behind him stood a young woman, her hand almost touching his back. Alyssa. My breath caught. The air suddenly felt thin. Before I could step inside, a heavy footstep sounded behind me. The office door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the window. I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. Only dust swirling in the afternoon light. For a moment, I stood frozen, realizing something that made the hairs on my arms rise. Whatever was in that room, they were determined to keep me from it. The night Peter died, the sky looked wrong. Heavy. Low. The kind of darkness that feels like it's warning you, even if you don't know what for. He'd been restless all afternoon. Pacing. Staring at his phone. Jumping every time a notification buzzed. I asked him if everything was okay, and he just said, "It's nothing, baby. Just farm stuff. I'll handle it." But his hands were shaking. Around dusk, Daryl barged into the kitchen, smelling like cheap beer and old sweat. "Come on, Pete," he said. "Need you to ride with me to town." Peter hesitated, looked at me for a long second, like he wanted to say something, then grabbed his jacket and followed his brother out the door. I watched the truck's taillights disappear down the dirt road. Something inside me twisted. 2 hours later, Gloria burst into the living room screaming, "Marion! Get your coat! We gotta go." They crashed. The words hit me like a slap. The drive to the hospital was a blur, rain pounding the windshield, Gloria praying loud enough to shake the air, Randall gripping the wheel with white knuckles. When we arrived, a nurse met us at the entrance and asked us to sit. Daryl survived. A few bruises. A cracked rib. Peter didn't. The doctor explained the injuries, the impact, the speed, but all I remember is the sound of Gloria wailing like the whole world owed her an apology. At the funeral, she clung to Daryl like he had lost a husband. People whispered, hugged her, comforted her. I stood alone by the casket, staring at Peter's still face, trying to make sense of a marriage that had cracked open before it even had time to settle. And when Gloria leaned in close and whispered, "He wouldn't have gone out in that storm if you hadn't been complaining all day," I felt something inside me shatter. Not from grief. From blame. After the funeral, the house felt different. Quieter, yes, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that waits for you to break, the kind that watches to see where you'll fall. For the first 2 days, Gloria played the grieving mother, sitting on the couch clutching a blanket, rocking back and forth, whispering Peter's name. I tried to help you bringing tea, making dinner, checking on Daryl's bandages, but every gesture I made seemed to irritate her. On the third morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Randall at the table, sorting papers into neat piles. Gloria and Daryl sat across from him, silent. When Randall looked up, his expression was cold and businesslike. "Sit down, Marion. We need to talk." Something about his tone made my stomach tighten, but I sat. He pushed a thick folder toward me. "Now that Peter's gone, we have to get our affairs in order. Farm ownership, bills, responsibilities, things like that." I opened the folder. It was full of documents, land deeds, tax forms, old insurance papers, all with Randall Brooks listed as the sole owner. I frowned. "Where's Peter's name?" Randall shrugged. "Removed for tax purposes. This is family land. Been in our name for generations. You married Peter, not the soil." Gloria folded her arms. best thing for you right now is to stay put, help around the house, and let us handle the business. We'll figure out a place for you. A place for me? Like I was some misplaced package waiting to be stamped and sorted. I tried to speak calmly. I just need to understand what I'm entitled to. Entitled? Gloria snapped, her voice sharp as barbed wire. You're entitled to a roof over your head because we're generous. That's it. The words hit me like a slap. Peter hadn't even been in the ground a week, and they were already shutting me out, legally, financially, emotionally. And when Randall slid the folder back toward himself, one thing was painfully clear: this wasn't my home. It never had been. A few days after that meeting at the kitchen table, I decided I couldn't take their word for anything anymore. I needed answers, real ones, not the half-truths and guilt-laced explanations the Brooks family kept throwing at me like scraps. So I walked into town. It was a long walk, a dusty road, heat pressing down on my shoulders, cars passing without slowing, but it was the first step I'd taken alone since Peter died. By the time I reached the small brown brick bank near Main Street, my legs were aching, but my resolve was stronger than it had ever been. Inside, the bank manager, a quiet woman with kind eyes, listened while I explained that my husband had passed and I needed information about our accounts. She typed Peter's name into her computer, her expression shifting from polite to concerned. Are you aware, she asked gently, that your husband listed a dependent on his life insurance policy? My breath caught. A dependent? She nodded. A child. Under 2 years old. My heart thudded against my ribs. And there's another thing, she continued. There appears to be a secondary address attached to his profile. An address in Alabama. Alabama. I whispered it under my breath like it was a foreign word. The manager showed me the file. The address was listed under the name Alyssa Grant, the same woman I'd seen in the wedding photos, the same woman in the picture holding that baby in the barn office. My vision blurred for a moment. Not from shock, but from recognition. I wasn't imagining the pieces. I wasn't being paranoid. Peter had a whole second life, and his parents had known all along. Walking back to the farm felt like walking toward a cage I hadn't realized I was already locked inside. And as the house came into view, one truth settled heavy in my chest: I wasn't just widowed. I was trapped. By people who had never meant for me to stand on my own. After my visit to the bank, something in me shifted, quietly, but enough for Gloria to sense it. She had a way of sniffing out change like a hound catching a new scent. I didn't tell her what I learned. I didn't ask questions. I simply walked into the house carrying a truth they never wanted me to find. And somehow, she knew. The very next morning, before the sun finished rising, I walked into the kitchen and found a sheet of paper taped to the refrigerator. A handwritten list. My name at the top. Under it: feed chickens, wash floors, prepare breakfast, clean barn, loft, reorganize pantry, iron laundry, dust upstairs rooms, check fences behind East Field. The list stretched almost to the bottom of the page. Gloria, I said slowly, this is a lot. She didn't even look up from her bowl of oatmeal. Someone has to keep this house running. You're the one with the free time. Randall glanced at me over his coffee. Work keeps the mind busy. Good for grief. But grief wasn't what they were trying to manage. They were trying to bury me under tasks, keep me too tired to think, too busy to dig, too exhausted to question. Now that Peter was gone, I wasn't a wife. I was a resource. Labor they didn't have to pay for. Mouth they could control. Even Daryl joined in, limping dramatically around the house. Can't do much with this rib, he groaned, though he'd lifted 2 hay bales the day before when he thought no one was watching. I stared at that list on the fridge, feeling the edges of a truth they didn't want me to see. They weren't grieving Peter. They were tightening their hold on me. That night, after finishing every chore on Gloria's list, after the floors were scrubbed, the chickens were fed, the dishes washed, the laundry ironed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My arms ached. My back throbbed. My hands smelled like bleach no matter how many times I washed them. But my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept seeing the Alabama address. The insurance file. A baby who wasn't mine, being supported with money taken from a marriage I thought was real. And then, like a memory breaking through fog, I remembered something. My old phone. Not the one Randall upgraded for me, the one that suddenly came with a banking app one never asked for. But the cracked, dusty phone I had before I moved to the farm. The one with my original contacts, my emails, my independence. I climbed quietly out of bed, careful not to wake the creaky floorboards. In the dark, I searched the attic, a place Gloria rarely bothered to clean. Boxes, old quilts, broken picture frames, and finally, a small plastic bin with my handwriting on it. I opened it. There it was. My old phone. Screen chipped, battery nearly dead, but mine. My throat tightened as I held it. I didn't realize how much I missed something that belonged only to me. Back in my room, I plugged it in with a spare charger I'd hidden away. A tiny light blinked. The screen lit up. Slowly, painfully, but it came alive. My hands shook as I tapped through old messages. Contacts. Photos. Everything Randall and Gloria never wanted me to access again. Deep inside, fear began to loosen its grip. For the first time since Peter died, I felt something unfamiliar on that farm, a choice. A small spark of power. And I wasn't about to let it go out. 2 days after I revived my old phone, something strange happened. The office above the barn was left unlocked again. Not wide open this time. Just cracked, just enough to tempt a woman who'd finally stopped believing in coincidences. I waited until Gloria and Randall drove into town for feed and Daryl wandered off toward the woods with a beer can in hand. My heart hammered in my chest as I climbed the narrow stairs. Every step creaked like it was warning me to turn back. But I didn't. Inside, the room smelled like dust and motor oil. Papers were scattered across the metal desk like someone had searched through them in a hurry. A worn brown ledger sat open, the spine cracked from years of use. I moved closer. The first few pages looked normal enough, feed costs, crop estimates, tractor repairs. Then I turned the page. There it was. A column labeled labor. Under Randall's name, monthly compensation. Under Daryl's, reduced amount with injury accommodation. Under Shanice, occasional payments for bookkeeping. Then my name. Marion Brooks, room and board offset. $0. Zero value. Just a note, meals, lodging, household contributions, balanced. My stomach twisted. I flipped further. That's when I saw a second column, discreet, easy to miss, titled simply AG. Next to each month, a payment. Always the same amount. Always consistent. AG Alyssa Grant. The younger wife. Money that should have been part of our household, redirected to her. Before I could dig deeper, a heavy floorboard groaned behind me. I froze. Held my breath. Listened. No voice. No footsteps. Just the wind. But when I looked back at the ledger, the truth hit me hard. This family wasn't just hiding Peter's second life. They were funding it. And they were doing it with the sweat of my unpaid labor. After finding that ledger, I tried to act normal, or at least normal enough that Gloria wouldn't sniff out the fear twisting in my stomach. But the Brooks family had this instinct. They didn't need proof to know when someone was drifting out of their control. They just felt it. And the moment they sensed my silence wasn't the same kind of silence as before, everything shifted. It started with the mail. Envelopes that used to land on the kitchen table now sat in Gloria's bedroom drawer. I only discovered it because I walked in to put clean linens away and saw her sliding a stack of letters into a shoebox. Farm business, she said sharply, slamming the lid shut. Then came the phone calls. Neighbors I'd grown friendly with stopped waving when I walked down the road. At the grocery store, folks glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I didn't understand it until Shanice came by one afternoon, pretending to check on me. She sat at the kitchen table, stirring sugar into her sweet tea, fake concern dripping off every word. People been talking, she said with a sigh. Say you're not handling the grief right. Say you're jumpy. saying strange things. Strange like what? I asked. She shrugged, eyes wide with fake innocence. Oh, just rumors. That you've been yelling at the family. Breaking things. Crying in the yard at night. I stared at her. None of that happened. She smiled tightly. Well, perception is reality, Marion. Then she patted my hand, like I was some lost child, and whispered, you know, folks think you might not be stable enough to be on your own. I pulled my hand back. Because I understood exactly what they were doing. They weren't just isolating me. They were building a story about me, a lie they could use later. A lie to keep me from running. Or worse, a lie to make the world believe I was the problem if I ever tried. Peter kept his jackets in a narrow wooden wardrobe at the end of the hallway. Most of them were old denim or worn cotton, work clothes with frayed cuffs and faded elbows. I hadn't touched them since the funeral. Every time I walked past, something inside me pulled tight, like opening that door would break me all over again. But one afternoon, while putting away folded towels, I noticed the wardrobe door was slightly ajar. Not much. Just enough for a sleeve to fall forward, like it was calling me. I stood there for a moment, swallowing that familiar sting in my throat, then finally reached inside. His scent hit me first. Sweat. Soap. Dust from long days in the fields. Memories rushed in fast, too fast, and I almost closed the door again. But something made me check the pockets. I don't know if it was instinct, hope, or just desperation. I slipped my hand into the inside pocket of his old brown jacket. That's when my fingers touched cold metal. A key. Small, brass, old-fashioned, not the kind used for houses or cars. I held it in my palm, staring at the worn edges. It looked used. Important. And then it hit me. The locked metal desk in the office above the barn. The same desk Randall hovered over like it held the family's entire skeleton closet. My breath caught. My pulse began to race. I looked around the hallway, listening for footsteps. Nothing. Then I tucked the key deep into my pocket, my fingers curling around it like it was the first real lifeline I'd had in months. In that moment, fear curled into something sharper. Power. Not a lot, just a spark. But I knew exactly where that key needed to go. And exactly what door it was meant to open. I told myself I would wait. Wait for the right moment to use the brass key. Wait until the house was quiet, until Gloria wasn't lurking around corners listening for footsteps. But life on that farm didn't give me peace, only small slivers of chance. One of those slivers came when I went out to hang laundry behind the barn. Voices drifted from the other side of the building. Low. Rough. Daryl's laugh, that sloppy, careless sound he made after too many beers, rolled across the dirt. I almost turned back inside, but then I heard him say Peter's name. Something in me froze. I edged closer, staying behind a stack of old feed sacks. Man, you know that wreck wasn't on me, Daryl muttered, his tone defensive. A second voice, one of his drinking buddies, huffed out a laugh. Then why you always lookin' over your shoulder? Daryl cursed under his breath. I wasn't even supposed to be drivin'. Told him that road was slick. He insisted. Then his voice dropped. And anyway, what the cops don't know ain't gonna hurt nobody. Silence. Then both men laughed, loud and mean. My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. Because that wasn't what Daryl told the sheriff. That wasn't what he told the insurance investigator. And it sure wasn't what he told Gloria. He'd been the one driving. Not Peter. Not the way he claimed. I stepped back carefully, pulse racing. If Daryl lied about the crash, what else had the Brooks family twisted into their version of truth? When I reached the clothesline, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely clip the sheets. But I did what I'd started learning to do on that farm. I pressed record on my old phone. Just in case they slipped again. And for the first time, it felt like their lies were beginning to crack. After hearing Daryl brag about the crash, something inside me snapped, not loudly, not in anger, but in a quiet, steady way. The kind of snap that means you're done waiting. Done hoping people will choose decency on their own. I needed help. Real help. Help from someone outside the Brooks family's reach. So the next morning, before anyone else woke up, I slipped out of the house with my old phone hidden in my bra and my heart beating like a warning drum. I walked the long road into town, 5 miles of dust, heat, and my own breath trying to outrun fear. The community center sat across from the library, a faded brick building with a blue sign that leaned slightly to the left. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for when I stepped inside. But the moment the cool air hit my face, my knees suddenly felt weak. A woman at the front desk looked up, warm eyes, dark hair pulled into a bun, calm energy that felt like shade on a burning day. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. I hesitated. The words knotted in my throat. I think I'm in a bad situation," I whispered. She stood immediately and motioned me toward a small office with soft lighting and 2 chairs. "I'm Miss Kaur," she said. "You can tell me whatever you need to." And so I did. Not everything at first, just slivers. The chores. The control. The missing money. The accident. How I felt like I was losing myself piece by piece. Miss Kaur listened without interrupting, her face steady, her posture soft but strong. "This is not just grief," she said quietly when I finished. "This is control. And it's not your fault." She handed me a card. "Document everything. And come back tomorrow if you can. We'll figure this out, together." For the first time in months, I felt something loosen in my chest. Someone believed me. And that meant the Brooks family's hold on me had just started to crack. That night, after meeting Miss Kaur, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ledger, the payments to Alyssa, the photo of Peter holding that baby, the way Gloria slammed the office door shut like she was sealing a tomb. And then I saw the brass key. The one I found in Peter's jacket. The one that fit the desk drawer Randall guarded like treasure. Around midnight, the house finally quieted. Gloria's snoring drifted down the hallway like a growling engine. Daryl's TV clicked off. The floorboards stopped their creaking. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding so loud I was afraid it might wake someone. I crept through the kitchen, past the cold stove, past Randall's boots on the mat, out into the yard. The moon hung low and golden, lighting the path to the barn. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old hay. The stairs creaked under my feet, but I moved slowly, breath shallow. When I reached the office door, I didn't hesitate. The key slid into the drawer lock with a soft metallic click. Like it had been waiting. Inside the drawer was a thick folder tied with worn string. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The first document, a marriage certificate. Peter Brooks and Alyssa Grant. Dated 2 years before my wedding. The second, a birth certificate with Peter listed as acknowledged father. My stomach twisted. Then came the bank transfers. Monthly payments from Randall to Alyssa. Then another folder, loan applications signed under Peter's name, debts I never knew existed. At the very bottom, wrapped in a manila sleeve, was a draft will, naming me as co-owner of the farm. Unfinished. Unsubmitted. Hidden. I stared at it all, feeling a cold, clean clarity spread through my chest. This wasn't grief anymore. This wasn't confusion. This was a plan. A strategy. A map of every lie they thought I'd never see. And for the first time since stepping foot on that farm, I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't sleep after opening that drawer. I sat on the edge of the barn loft until dawn, the documents spread around me like scattered bones of a truth I was never meant to uncover. Every page felt heavier than the last, betrayal layered on betrayal, lies stitched into a life I thought I understood. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I wasn't confronting them. Not yet. Not without protection. I tucked the documents back exactly as I found them, tied the string the same way, placed the folder at the same angle, everything precise. If Randall noticed the slightest change, he'd smell blood in the water. Then, with the brass key warm in my palm, I walked the long dirt road into town again. The morning heat rose off the pavement like waves. My legs trembled. My throat was tight. But I walked anyway. At the community center, Miss Kaur's eyes widened when she saw me clutching a brown envelope against my chest like a lifeline. "You found something," she whispered. I nodded, too overwhelmed to explain in full. She led me into her office and locked the door behind us. My hands shook as I laid out everything: the marriage certificate, the birth certificate, the monthly payments, the forged loan applications, the unfinished will. Miss Kaur didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't judge. She simply breathed slowly, deliberately, then said, "Marion, this is bigger than emotional abuse. This is financial exploitation, fraud, and concealment." She made copies of every document, one set for her, one set for me, and placed them gently into a new envelope. "Take these to the attorney I'm referring you to," she said. "Her name is Nadia Hussein. And she's very, very good." For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone quietly gathering their weapons. Miss Kaur gave me the address to a small legal aid office tucked between a hardware store and a tax service. The building didn't look like much from the outside: peeling paint, flickering sign, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Security. A receptionist led me to a quiet office where a woman in a navy blazer sat behind a wooden desk piled with thick case files. She looked up, her expression steady, sharp, patient. "You must be Marion," she said. "I'm Nadia Hussein. Please, sit." I placed the envelope on her desk with shaking hands. Nadia didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at me, really looked, like she was trying to understand the whole story before I even spoke. "Miss Kaur told me a little," she said gently. "But I want to hear from you." It took me a moment to find my voice. I told her everything I could without falling apart: the chores, the control, the ledger, the payments marked AG, the Alabama address, the false stories, the accident. Then I pushed the envelope toward her. Nadia put on glasses and began examining each document slowly. No dramatic reactions. No gasps. Just quiet, focused reading. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sharper than before. "Marion," she said, "what you're dealing with is not just manipulation. It's fraud. Coercive control. Potential identity misuse. And possibly bigamy." The room felt still. "You have more rights than they've led you to believe. And more leverage than you realize." I swallowed hard. "So, what do I do now?" Nadia leaned forward, folding her hands. "First, you stay calm. You gather everything. And you let them make the next mistake." For the first time, someone wasn't telling me to endure. Someone was telling me to prepare. And I knew then, the Brooks family had no idea a storm was coming. The Brooks family didn't call family meetings often. So when Randall shouted my name from the bottom of the stairs that evening, his voice stiff and clipped, I knew something was wrong. The kind of wrong that makes the hairs on your neck lift. I walked into the living room and found them already arranged like a tribunal. Gloria sat in her favorite armchair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Daryl leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like he was waiting for a show. And Randall stood by the dining table, a stack of papers spread out in front of him. "Sit," he ordered. I stayed standing. Randall didn't like that, but he pressed on, sliding a packet across the table toward me. "This here is an agreement," he said. "Just a formality. It says you acknowledge the farm belongs solely to the Brooks family and you won't pursue any claims to the land or assets." My heart thudded. He wasn't wasting time. He wanted me cornered, legally, financially, emotionally. I kept my face calm. Why would I sign something like that? Gloria leaned forward, her voice dipped in false kindness. "Baby, it's just to keep peace. We don't need outsiders poking into family matters." "Outsiders?" I repeated. "I was Peter's wife." Daryl scoffed. "Barely." Something in me hardened. Randall cleared his throat. You get to stay here as long as you behave yourself. You'll have a roof, food, a place. But you won't meddle in business. Sign it, and we can move on. I looked at the packet, the trap, written in clean margins and legal language. Then I heard Nadia's voice in my head, let them make the next mistake. I pushed the papers back toward Randall. I won't sign anything, I said quietly. Not without my lawyer looking at it first. The room snapped tight like a rubber band pulled too far. Gloria's eyes widened. Daryl stepped forward. Randall's jaw clenched so hard I heard the click. You got yourself a lawyer, he asked, voice low and dangerous. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said. I do. And that was the moment the balance shifted, just a little, but enough for them to feel it. I didn't tell Nadia what happened in that living room right away, but I didn't have to. Because the very next day, the Brooks family launched their counterattack. It started at church. I stayed home, my nerves were stretched thin, and I needed space to think. But Gloria dressed herself in her best navy skirt, pinned her hair up high, and marched out with Randall and Daryl like an army heading to the front lines. By noon, I understood why. When they came back, the house felt different. Charged. Like a storm had rolled through without a drop of rain. My phone buzzed with a message from a woman I barely knew, a neighbor who'd always smiled kindly at me. Are you okay? Heard some worrying things. I stepped onto the back porch, my hands shaking, and read more messages trickling in. Rumors. Whispers. Half-truths twisted into weapons. That I'd been unbalanced since Peter's death. That I'd screamed at Gloria and threatened to burn the house down. That I was fixated on money and refusing to accept the Lord's will. That the family was concerned for their safety. I almost threw up. They knew exactly what they were doing, building a public story to discredit me before I ever stepped into a courtroom. Shanice arrived that afternoon with a casserole, her eyes wide like she was looking at a wild animal behind bars. She lowered her voice. Girl, the things they're saying, it's not good. Folks think you might be dangerous. Dangerous. Me. The woman who'd cooked for them, cleaned for them, did every chore they tossed my way. I looked her dead in the eyes. Shanice, you know that isn't true. She hesitated just a fraction too long. That's not what people are hearing. And that's when it hit me, the Brooks family wasn't just trying to erase my rights. They were trying to erase my credibility. Erase me. The Brooks family must have felt the shift the moment I mentioned the word lawyer. Because 2 days later, the trap they'd been quietly building snapped shut, not on me, but on them. I was sweeping the hallway when Randall's truck pulled into the driveway. He slammed the door harder than necessary, stomped up the porch steps, and shoved a thick envelope through the screen door so hard it bounced on the floor. For you, he barked, not making eye contact. Gloria stood behind him, lips pressed tight, hands trembling not with fear, but with barely contained rage. I picked up the envelope. Legal letterhead. Affirm from Jackson. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. What is this? Randall smirked. A warning. Stop sticking your nose where it don't belong. Stop talking to people. Stop digging. Gloria chimed in. We're giving you a chance to stay here, Marion. Don't make us take measures. Measures. I went to my room, locked the door, and opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a formal letter, accusing me of harassment. Accusing me of emotional instability. Accusing me of interfering with the farm's operations. And threatening eviction and a restraining order if I continued my disruptive behavior. My throat tightened. This was it. Their official attempt to paint me as unstable, dangerous, unfit. Exactly the story they'd been spreading in town. I took a breath, long and steady, then scanned the pages again. Every lie. Every accusation. Every threat. And then something clicked. They had put it in writing. The very thing Nadia told me to wait for. I walked to the window, watching Randall and Gloria argue on the porch, each blaming the other for something I couldn't hear. They thought they were tightening the net around me. But what they didn't know was this: a documented threat from them was exactly what my case needed. The trap they set wasn't closing on me. It was closing on them. I brought the legal threat letter straight to Nadia the next morning. I didn't call ahead. I didn't wait for an appointment. I walked into her office with the envelope held tight against my chest like a shield that had finally found its warrior. She glanced at my face once and knew something big had happened. "Sit," she said, already reaching for a notepad. I handed her the letter. Nadia unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning line after line with the precision of someone who'd seen manipulation dressed up as legal language more times than she could count. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a soft, almost amused breath. "Well," she said, "they've given us exactly what we needed." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Nadia tapped the paper. "This letter accuses you of instability without evidence. It threatens eviction without legal cause. And it explicitly names your attempts to access financial information as harassment. That is coercive control on paper. It proves they're trying to isolate you." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "And," she continued, sliding another document toward me, "we now get to respond." Her reply letter was firm. Measured. Devastating. She cited labor exploitation, financial misrepresentation, fraudulent loan activity under Peter's name, concealment of a second marriage, interference with inheritance rights, intimidation tactics, potential paternity misrepresentation. "For now," Nadia said, "we won't reveal everything. Let them wonder what you know." She folded the papers neatly and handed me a copy. "When they read this," she said, "they'll realize you're not fighting alone." Walking out of her office, the sun felt different, warmer, sharper, like a light aimed directly at the truth. The Brooks family wanted a war. But what they didn't expect was that I'd come armed with their own lies. When Nadia mailed her response, something shifted at the Brooks farm, not loudly, not in the way storms usually announce themselves. It was quieter. Heavier. A pressure in the air like the sky itself was holding its breath. The house felt colder even in the summer heat. Gloria stopped speaking to me altogether. She moved around the kitchen with tight, jerky motions, slamming cabinet doors and muttering prayers under her breath like she was trying to ward off a demon. Randall avoided eye contact. He spent long hours pacing the porch, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and angry. Once, I heard him say, "She wasn't supposed to find anything." Another time, "Those loans weren't my idea," Peter agreed. And the one that made my blood run cold: "If this gets out, we're finished." Daryl, on the other hand, reacted in the only way he knew how, with aggression. He started bumping into me on purpose, knocking laundry out of my hands, kicking the mop bucket so water splashed my legs. "Watch where you're goin'," he'd sneer, even though we both knew he'd walked directly into me. One evening, as I hung sheets on the line, he stepped so close behind me that I could feel the heat of his breath on my neck. "You think you're smart," he whispered. "But you ain't. You think some lawyer gonna save you? This is our land. Our family." I didn't turn around. Didn't flinch. Didn't give him the satisfaction. I simply said, "We'll see." Because by then, I wasn't afraid of Daryl. Or Gloria. Or Randall. I was afraid of what they'd already done, and what they were willing to do to keep it buried. But fear wasn't steering me anymore. Truth was. And truth has a way of rattling cages long before it sets you free. The Brooks family thought they could intimidate me back into silence. But what they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that silence was no longer an option. Not after everything I'd seen. Not after everything they'd hidden. A week after Nadia sent her response, she called me into her office again. When I sat down, she placed a stack of papers between us, thicker than before, official seals shining in the corner. "It's time," she said. I swallowed. "Time for what?" "For us to file." She slid the top document toward me. "A petition for a formal probate hearing. It forces the court to examine Peter's estate, the farm finances, and the documents you discovered." My pulse quickened. This isn't a quiet process, Nadia added. Randall and Gloria will be notified. So will any other parties connected to Peter. Other parties. Alyssa. Her baby. And possibly whoever else the Brooks family tried to hide. Will this be public? I asked. Yes, she said. Witnesses can be called. Evidence will be reviewed. Lies will be questioned under oath. I felt the weight of her words in my bones. Public. Under oath. No more whispers. No more kitchen muttering. No more locked drawers and hidden envelopes. Truth finally dragged into the light. Nadia leaned forward, her eyes steady and warm. This is your moment to reclaim everything they took from you. You ready? I thought about the farm. About Gloria's cold stare. About Randall's manipulation. About Daryl's threats. About the child in that hidden photograph. About the life Peter lived in shadows. And the life I was ready to pull into daylight. Yes, I said softly. Let's do it. She filed the petitions that afternoon. And as I walked out of her office into the sunlight, I realized the war the Brooks family tried to keep behind closed doors was about to break open in public. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn. Not because I was nervous, though the nerves were there, but because I finally felt ready. Ready in a way I hadn't felt since stepping foot on that farm. Ready in a way that came from truth, not fear. I stood in front of the small mirror in my room, smoothing the collar of the simple navy blouse I bought from the thrift store 2 days earlier. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't fancy. But it was mine. And after months of being spoken for, moved around, and worked like a ghost, having something of my own mattered more than I expected. Nadia picked me up in her silver sedan. As we drove toward the county courthouse, she explained everything calmly, how the process would work, who would speak first, what documents she would present. Her voice was steady, grounding. The kind of voice you hold on to when everything else in your life has tried to drown you out. But nothing, not Nadia's guidance, not Miss Core's encouragement, not my late-night rehearsals, prepared me for the moment I walked through those courthouse doors. Because the Brooks family was already there. Gloria sat on one side of the waiting area, hands clamped around a tissue like it was a weapon. Randall stood next to her, jaw tight, eyes locked onto me the moment I entered. And Daryl leaned back in his chair, smirking like the outcome was already written. But they weren't the only ones. Across the room, holding her baby against her shoulder, sat Alyssa. Her eyes met mine, tired, wounded, searching, and for the first time, I saw the truth in them. She wasn't my enemy. She was another woman caught in the same web. Nadia touched my arm gently. Remember, she whispered, you're not walking in as a victim today. I took a breath. I walked forward. And the hearing room doors opened like a stage curtain being pulled back for the final act. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights. A long wooden table. A judge who looked more tired than intimidating. No dramatic thunder. No spotlight. Just people and truth waiting to be pulled out of them. The judge called the case, and everyone settled into their seats. Nadia sat straight beside me, calm as still water. Across the aisle, Gloria stared at the floor, clutching her tissue like she was squeezing the truth out of it. Daryl shifted in his chair, tapping his foot. Randall, though, sat tall, the chin lifted, hands folded neatly, a man ready to perform. The judge motioned for him to speak first. Randall stood and began talking like he was giving a Sunday school lesson. Smooth. Controlled. Practiced. He painted the farm as a place of generosity. A home where I was welcomed and treated like family. He described me as grief-stricken, lost, and confused after Peter's death. He implied I'd invented problems, exaggerated disagreements, stirred unnecessary tension. He even said, with a straight face, we offered Marion a safe place to stay. Out of love. Love. I gripped the edge of my chair so tight my knuckles whitened. Then he shifted, lowering his voice like he was sharing a painful truth. Peter never contributed much financially, he said. We covered most bills. Marion was aware of our arrangements. Lies. Polished, well-rehearsed lies. And she's been unstable lately, he added. We're concerned she's… Stop. The judge raised a hand. Randall froze mid-sentence. We'll move one step at a time, the judge said. Your claims will be evaluated after counsel responds and evidence is reviewed. For the first time, something flickered in Randall's eyes. A crack. A tiny sign that maybe, just maybe, the performance wasn't landing. Nadia leaned toward me, whispering softly, now we flip the script. When Randall finally sat down, the room felt heavier, like his version of the truth was a fog trying to settle over everything. But Nadia didn't let a single drop land. She rose slowly, smoothing her blazer, and stepped toward the table with a calmness that made even the judge straighten in his seat. Your Honor, she began, we'd like to present Exhibit A. She placed a thick, worn brown ledger on the table. Randall's ledger. The one I wasn't supposed to see. The one he thought would always stay locked in that dusty office above the barn. She opened it to the pages I'd photographed. The columns. The numbers. The lies written neatly in ink. According to Mr. Brooks, she said, tapping the entries with her pen, my client was treated like family. Yet here, under labor, she is listed as… She paused, letting the judge read it himself. Room and board offset. 0 compensation. 0 recognition. The judge's brow tightened. This ledger documents regular payments to other family members, Nadia continued, but nothing for Marion. Not a single dollar, despite years of full-time work. Randall shifted. First small. Then bigger. And additionally, Nadia said, her voice steady as steel, the ledger includes a second column marked AG, showing undisclosed monthly payments. Randall swallowed hard. The judge looked up. Mr. Brooks, who is AG? Randall stammered. It's not relevant, it is, Nadia said, sliding forward another document. A bank transfer record tied to those initials. Silence swept across the room. Then Nadia placed the next document down, one I had uncovered in that desk drawer. A loan agreement, signed using Peter's name, dated months before he died. And these, she said, are loans Mr. Brooks took out under Marion's late husband, without Marion's knowledge. Randall's jaw clenched. Gloria's eyes finally lifted, wide with fear. Even Darryl stopped tapping his foot. The fog Randall tried to cast over the room was gone. Replaced by sunlight, harsh, revealing, unforgiving. The truth wasn't knocking anymore. It was walking straight in. If Randall was the planner, Darryl was the wild card, the one who always spoke 2 words more than he should, and never at the right time. So when the judge called him forward, I knew something inside this house of lies was about to split straight down the middle. Darryl swaggered up to the witness table, his shirt wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He plopped down into the chair like it was a bar stool, not a courthouse seat. The clerk reminded him to speak clearly and truthfully. That was the first mistake of the day, assuming Darryl knew how to do either. Nadia approached him slowly, like a person stepping into a yard with a barking dog, knowing it might bite but also knowing it couldn't help showing its teeth. Mr. Brooks, she began, you were the last person to see Peter alive. Correct? Darryl grinned. Yeah. We were driving back that night. Bad roads. Right, Nadia nodded. And in your statement to the sheriff, you claimed Peter was driving? Yep. She didn't blink. She placed a printed transcript on the table, a recording from my old phone. Could you read the highlighted line aloud, please? Darryl squinted. His lips moved slowly. Man, you know that wreck wasn't on me. I wasn't even supposed to be driving, he went still. The courtroom didn't breathe. Nadia stepped forward just an inch. Mr. Brooks, did you drive the truck the night Peter died? Darryl's mouth opened, shut, opened again, no words, just breath catching on fear. Randall stiffened. Gloria's face drained of color. The judge leaned back. Answer the question. Silence stretched. Finally, Daryl muttered, barely audible, "Yeah." A single word. But with it, the carefully crafted lie about the accident collapsed. Not just a crack this time. A break. Deep. Unmistakable. When the judge called Alyssa to the stand, the room shifted in a way I can't fully describe, like the air drew in closer, waiting to hear a truth nobody in that courtroom was prepared for. She walked slowly, holding her baby against her chest. The child slept with its cheek pressed to her shoulder, tiny fingers curled into her blouse. Alyssa sat down carefully, her hands trembling, but her eyes held something deeper than fear. They held exhaustion. Years of it. Nadia approached her with the same gentleness she used when talking to me. "Ms. Grant," Nadia began, "can you tell the court how you knew Peter Brooks?" Alyssa swallowed hard, her gaze flicking briefly toward Gloria, who shook her head just enough to send a message. But Alyssa didn't look away this time. "We were married," she said softly. 2 years before he married Marion. Gloria gasped like the confession had slapped her. Randall muttered something under his breath. The judge lifted a hand for silence. Alyssa shifted her baby gently and continued, "Peter told me he was separated, that he was fixing things, that the farm needed him for paperwork. He traveled back and forth. I didn't know about Marion. I swear I didn't." Her voice cracked, and she wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Nadia slid a document forward, "The marriage certificate I found in the locked drawer." "Is this your signature?" "Yes," Alyssa whispered. "And the child listed on this birth certificate, is Peter the father?" Alyssa nodded, eyes filling again. "He helped at first. But then the payments stopped 3 months before he died. I didn't know why. I thought he left us." Randall stiffened. Because he had been handling those payments, and he had stopped them. Nadia turned to the judge. "This supports the financial discrepancies we've presented." But I was staring at Alyssa, really seeing her. We weren't enemies. We were 2 women standing in the same wreckage, built by the same man, buried by the same family. And for the first time, the courtroom felt like the only place where every broken truth was finally being laid bare. When the judge called Gloria to the stand, she didn't rise slowly the way Alyssa had. She stood with the stiffness of a woman who believed the world owed her respect simply because she demanded it. She adjusted her church blouse, cleared her throat, and walked forward like she was stepping into her own living room, not a courtroom. She sat down, lifted her chin, and folded her hands in her lap with the same sharp precision she used to fold dish towels. Nadia didn't rush. She let a few seconds stretch, silent, steady, deliberate, until even the judge glanced at her. Then Nadia spoke. "Mrs. Brooks, you stated earlier that Marion was treated like family. Is that correct?" "Yes," Gloria said quickly, her voice firm. "We cared for her. We sheltered her." Nadia nodded. "Sheltered her. That's your word?" "Yes." "Then why," Nadia continued, sliding a printed screenshot onto the evidence table, "did you tell neighbors that Marion was unstable, dangerous, and needed supervision?" Gloria blinked. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I never said that," she lied, voice trembling ever so slightly. Nadia placed a second sheet in front of her. A message from Shanice confirming Gloria's exact words. "Mrs. Brooks," Nadia said softly, "your statement started a rumor that Marion was mentally unfit. That's not sheltering. That's character assassination." Randall shifted in his seat. Daryl stared at the floor. Gloria's face flushed red. "People misunderstanding something doesn't mean I said it." Nadia leaned in just an inch. "But you did say it. Multiple times. Including at church. Including to Ms. Grant." Alyssa lowered her eyes. The judge turned toward Gloria. "Mrs. Brooks, you are under oath. Answer carefully." Gloria's jaw twitched, a small, sharp movement, and suddenly she wasn't the iron-willed matriarch anymore. She was a woman standing on cracking ice, trying to pretend she didn't hear it breaking. For months, she had controlled the narrative with whispers, suspicions, and sideways looks. But here, under oath, under light, she had nowhere left to hide. The mask she'd worn for years didn't just slip. It shattered. If Gloria cracked, Randall fractured. And he knew it. The judge called him forward again, this time not as the polished spokesman of the family, but as someone who suddenly had a whole lot of explaining to do. He walked slowly, jaw tight, eyes darting between Nadia's file stack and the judge's expression. He sat. Hands clasped. Breath shallow. Nadia didn't waste time. Mr. Brooks, she began evenly, you testified earlier that the farm belonged solely to you, correct? Yes, he said quickly. My name's on every deed. On the recent deeds, Nadia clarified. But not the earlier ones. She placed a set of photocopies on the table. Your Honor, these are land records from 15 years ago. The original owner was Thomas Brooks, Randall's father. And under successor ownership, his sons were equal heirs. Randall frowned. That's true. But then, Nadia continued, sliding forward another document, we have this. A deed transfer form with Peter's signature. Except the judge noticed what Nadia wanted him to see. Mr. Brooks, the judge said slowly, this signature, did Peter sign this in your presence? Randall hesitated too long. Yes. Nadia placed a second sheet beside it, Peter's verified bank signature. 2 signatures. Visibly different. The room didn't breathe. Forgery, the judge murmured. Randall's face drained. And if that isn't enough, Nadia said, placing a final document down, we have loan records taken out under Peter's name, using the same falsified signature, tied directly to farm expenses. Randall's mouth twitched. Gloria whispered, Randall, what did you do? Darryl slid lower in his seat, like he wanted to sink into the floor. But Nadia wasn't finished. She lifted the last page, the draft will I found in the locked drawer. Your Honor, this document shows intent for Peter to be restored as a co-owner. Someone hid this. And someone prevented it from ever being filed. All eyes turned to Randall. He opened his mouth. But no sound came out. Because the truth wasn't just leaking out anymore. It was flooding the room. And Randall, the man who controlled every key, every drawer, every lie, was drowning in it. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, my throat tightened. Not from fear. Not anymore. But from the weight of everything I'd held in for months. I stood slowly. My legs felt strange, not weak, but new, like I needed a moment to remember how to use them as my own. Nadia nodded encouragingly. Alyssa held her baby close, watching me with soft, steady eyes. Gloria stared at her lap. Randall stared at the wall. Darryl stared at the floor. I took a breath. Your Honor, I began, my voice quieter than I expected. I didn't come to this farm looking for a fight. I married Peter because I loved him. I believed in him. And when he brought me into that house, I thought I was joining a family. My hands shook slightly, but I didn't hide them. But from the moment I arrived, I was treated like labor. Like a burden. Like someone who had to earn basic respect. They took away my job, my money, my independence, and they told me it was love. I looked directly at Gloria. You blamed me for his death. She flinched. I looked at Darryl. You lied about the crash. His jaw tightened. Then I looked at Randall, the man who hid documents that could have changed my entire future. And you forged my husband's name to make sure I stayed powerless. Silence. Deep and full. I am not unstable, I said. I am not dangerous. I am not confused. I am a woman who survived a house full of lies. And I am here because I refuse to disappear just because it's convenient for them. My voice didn't shake on the last line. I deserve the truth. And I deserve my life back. The room felt different when I sat down, lighter, sharper, clearer. Because for the first time, the story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. When I finished speaking, the judge didn't respond right away. He sat back, folded his hands, and let the silence settle over the room like dust after a demolition. It wasn't hostile silence. It was the kind that comes right before truth becomes official. He looked at Nadia first. Counsel, your evidence is thorough. Very thorough. Then he glanced at Randall. Mr. Brooks, what I've seen raises serious concerns. Randall's fists clenched on the table. Gloria reached for his arm, but he pulled away. The judge began listing the issues one by one. First, the ledger entries clearly document unequal labor expectations and financial control. That alone is concerning. Gloria's face turned pale. Second, the payments marked AG align with external financial records. This suggests funds were redirected without transparency. Alyssa lowered her head, embarrassed but relieved the truth was finally acknowledged. Third, these loan documents, he held up the forged signature, show discrepancies between the recorded signature and verified samples from Peter Brooks. Randall swallowed hard, his jaw twitching. And fourth, the judge said, lifting the draft will, this document shows an intent for co-ownership that was never executed. That raises questions about interference. Interference. A word that landed like a stone dropping into water, rippling through the entire courtroom. Darryl muttered, we didn't mean, but the judge cut him off sharply. Be quiet. Then the judge turned his gaze directly to me. Mrs. Brooks. I want you to hear me clearly. What happened to you was not confusion or grief. It was coercion. You were misled about your rights. You were isolated. And you were financially exploited. My breath hitched. And the court, he continued, will not allow that to stand. Gloria gasped. Randall slammed his hand against his knee. Darryl cursed under his breath. But the judge was already speaking again, firm, unwavering. I am ordering a full forensic audit of the farm accounts and a temporary freeze on all property transfers. Additionally, Marion Brooks will be granted formal standing in the estate proceedings. My heart thudded. Standing. A place. A voice. A legal identity they couldn't erase. The Brooks family had spent months trying to trap me on that farm. But now, under the bright lights of the courtroom, the trap had snapped shut on them. A week after the hearing, a thick envelope arrived at the community center with my name on it. Inside were copies of the judge's orders, notices of the audit, and a formal letter confirming my legal standing. But the most important part wasn't written on any page. It was the freedom I felt when I held it. Ms. Kaur hugged me tight, whispering, you did this. You got yourself out. Nadia shook my hand with a small, proud smile. You walked into that courtroom with truth, she said. And they walked in with lies. That's why you won. I walked the long road back to the farm one last time, not because I belonged there, but because I needed to close the door myself. When I reached the porch, the Brooks family was waiting. Gloria stood stiff, eyes red, mouth tight with the bitterness of a woman who had finally lost control. Randall refused to speak, staring at the ground like the dirt might swallow him. Darryl muttered something under his breath and stormed inside. I didn't go in. I didn't yell. I didn't spit spite. I didn't demand anything. I simply said, the audit team will be here Wednesday. I'll be staying elsewhere. Do not contact me unless it's through my attorney. Gloria opened her mouth to argue. But nothing came out. Because there was nothing left to say. I turned and walked down the steps, the gravel crunching under my shoes, the same sound I heard the day everything fell apart. Except this time, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Alyssa met me at the road with her baby on her hip. I'm leaving too, she said softly. We don't have to do this alone. I nodded, tears burning but not falling. Because she was right. We were both stepping out of a lie. We were both reclaiming our lives. And as we walked away from that house, two women once trapped by the same man, the same family, the same lies, I felt something settle in my chest, not forgiveness. Not revenge. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes when the truth finally wins. And the moral that carried me forward was simple. When someone tries to take your voice, your power, and your place in this world, you fight until you get all three back. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it. If you have a unique story of your own, share it in the comments below. Thank you for listening.